Okay, gents, welcome back, and thank you very much for spending a little time with us this afternoon. How we're going to do this is, I've got a couple of questions I'd like to ask the guys individually, and then we're going to open it to the floor. So I think any sort of data-related questions to the team here or myself, please go ahead. We've got roving mics floating around, so if you stick your hand up, we'll get a mic to you, then you can ask the question. Good. Okay, so first of all, I just want to just introduce you very, very briefly so that everybody's aware of your roles. And so Tim is Head of Marketing Operations at Fujitsu, and he has been responsible for bringing together a variety of Martech products into a coherent deployment across a large swathe of the Fujitsu suite. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. James McHarg is Head of Inside Sales at Extreme Networks here in EMEA. And Fredrik Sjostedt.
Close.
I knew I would never get it right. But Sjostedt. Fredrik is Chief Operations Marketing Manager and Head of Field Marketing at Extreme Networks. Good. Well, thank you. So I'd like to sort of start off by asking Tim a question around his view of the deployment of marketing automation Martech at Fujitsu. I know you've had it as a business, you've gone through some different changes to get there. Do you want to sort of outline some of the challenges you've faced and some of the decisions you had to make to be able to get a coherent Martech stack underway?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Tim from Fujitsu. Thanks for the intro, Nick. In the last couple of years, since I came into this operations role, our business was largely split into a massive array of disparate kind of silos. So for our EMEA business, we operate in about 35 different countries in EMEA. And up until 2 or 3 years ago, every single country operated completely autonomously. So we had separate budgets in every country, separate Martech stack, separate ownership in terms of technology, in terms of process and decision making, particularly around data, but also around the technology. And we had no oversight, no central ops function, no transparency, and no governance around what was done. So it sounds like a bit of a disaster, a bit of a nightmare, but it was actually a massive opportunity for our business to try and standardize the way that we do things in marketing. So when I came in, one of my roles fairly early on was to bring in a consolidated platform that could handle this absolute kind of carnage and chaos of data. We got lucky, or maybe not so lucky, that it timed in around the same time as GDPR was announced. So we kind of had an opportunity there to make sure that we could, for a start, become compliant, because that's the main number one priority as a business. But secondly, understand how we could start to bring all these different disparate data silos together. We had about 28 different platforms existing across 35 countries. Some of them were the same technology, some of them were different, and where we had the same technology, we had every country using it completely differently. So it'd been customized up to the hilt. We had 200-300 different data fields or records in each of these different systems, and then they were also spread across about 17 or 18 different languages. So coming in and starting to centralize from an ops perspective, the first challenge we had was identifying the size of the data. And it honestly felt, for a period of 6 months, felt like someone new with a new database, a new spreadsheet, a new platform, a new technology was coming out of the woodwork. So we were constantly going through this process of trying to gather all this information and find out exactly the size of our problem. I think that's something that a lot of marketers face in any organization, particularly of an enterprise scale, is trying to understand the size and the picture of the data. But for us, we had, I think, just over 1.2 million records sitting across 35 countries in every kind of state of quality to not quality you can imagine. And working quite closely with CleverTouch when we were deploying our Marketo instance, we were able to consolidate and migrate all of those. We definitely had quite a few challenges. I wouldn't say any of them are resolved yet, 2 years on. But we certainly had an issue of data ownership. So I think for a long time, and Nick spoke a bit about this, and so did Nigel today, there's a real challenge around people understanding the onus or the importance of their data and how it actually feeds into their marketing practice. So we're coming from a background of a lot of marketers being very traditional in their focus, Not a lot of marketers thinking digitally and thinking around how data can be used to enhance what they're doing, either from an insights perspective or a planning perspective. So we had a lot of challenges around transparency. A lot of those are rectified now, particularly some of the challenges we had was around our people sitting in the countries. For them to understand how their data was going to impact what they were doing, moving to a new world with market automation, was probably one of the biggest challenges. But taking them with it is something that we have done and tried to focus on a lot in the last 2 years. It's something we'll continue to focus on as well.
Thank you, Tim. That's a very sincere and succinct view of many challenges that you've had. Fredrik, let's turn to you.
Yes.
Yeah, you have a sort of more mature Martech stack at Extreme, I believe, and now I'd just like to articulate some of the benefits you're now beginning to see by having gone through many of the pains that Tim is currently underway.
Yes, I think the origins are not necessarily dissimilar. So, I mean, I came on board with Extreme just over 4 years ago, and it was very similar, very disaggregated marketing function. The individual countries operating on their own, the regions, so APAC, EMEA, and the US, or Americas, not necessarily aligned. And my charter at that point was to bring these organizations into one coherent unit in that sense. So that was plodding along quite well. We had already had at that point, I mean, Salesforce has been around for basically since Salesforce was new. We had Marketo for about 4 or 5 years when I arrived. And things were ticking along, and then we went on a buying spree, which is always interesting. So we bought the networking assets out of Brocade, we bought the networking assets out of Avaya, and with those 2 acquisitions happening literally simultaneously, that was a bit of a problem, because we weren't buying entire companies, we were buying assets essentially. So it was a very time-constrained window of how we could get access to information and then bring that in. And if you have very little time, a question came up in our executive staff. It's like, okay, so we've now just bought 2 other companies. We've tripled the size of the company, essentially. Did we just buy the same customer set twice over? What did we get, really? So we kind of went away and said, well, let's actually take a look at that. So took all the data from us, Brocade, Avaya, bring that together, rationalize, dedupe, and it was interesting. I mean, we had Walmart was in Salesforce 2,200 times. And I'm not kidding, it was horrible. But getting to the point of actually rationalizing that data and then coming back with a Venn diagram. This is our customers, and in the 3 buckets, and where do we see the overlap? And the overlap, luckily, was very, very small, so that was a good thing. Sigh of relief at that point. But that really started to lead into kind of the salesman's 3 questions, or rather statements, like, I need leads, and I need leads, and I need leads. Like, okay, shit, we need to figure this out. So that's when we kind of went on this path of really driving into applying more intelligence. We didn't necessarily get more marketing budget, so starting some skunk works and trying to figure out how do we now apply intelligence into all of this. So that's been a 2.5-year journey from our perspective to really start looking into the data that we have on existing customers and prospects to see propensity to buy. How do we score them from that perspective? How do we look at search information? Are they actually in market? Are they active? Are they looking in the topics that we are interested in, so to speak? Are they searching on us and competitors and so on? And how are they engaging with our assets, our website, our campaigns, our social media, our digital footprints, and so on around the world? So we're able to kind of bring all of that information together and then update our various platforms, Salesforce in particular, on a weekly basis.
Okay.
So that's been a big step from our perspective, and we went live in Salesforce about 6 months ago, where we're now kind of beginning to really see these things. And the question that I get is from again, an executive staff perspective, so what's the ROI on this thing? I don't know. I have no idea. What's the ROI on Salesforce? What's the ROI on Marketo? These are table stakes. I mean, we have a finite amount of money, we have to go invest it wisely. Why not spend it on people and organizations where we think that there is a need right now that we may or may not see historically, but we can now apply intelligence to that and go and drive that forward. So that's why I brought James.
Fine piece of time here. And James, yes, from the sales perspective,
Sure.
what are you beginning to see as the benefit of this level of investment?
So high-level statistics. I mean, let me give you a business case. I think Surge is a really powerful tool outside of the propensity to buy. That we have 4 gradings of A, B, C, D. A being the most positive and D not being, or the least likely to buy, or least likely to work with us. You know, so you're an inside salesperson. You have a lot of leads that we talked about at the top of the funnel. A lot of that data that you have to try and. You're in a role where KPIs matter. Efficiency matters. You're in a cash-driven environment. You're incentivized to go and create opportunities, create appointments, drive sales and drive conversion. So you have a list of, let's say 100 warm leads. They might not be engaged or MQ'd yet. Being able to give that to an inside salesperson and say, well, now you, in Salesforce, you can say, well, which are surging on Extreme? Which are surging on our competition? Which are surging on key topics that we're out there marketing to at the moment? So all of a sudden, we then go and run that list and we say, well, what are the A's and B's out of those 100? Which ones are surging in the last 2 weeks? What are the key topics they're looking at? Are they looking at us? Are they looking at a competitor? Oh, well, now I have 6. So I go and call those 6. And lo and behold, we get a result out of those 6. And we just keep rinsing and repeating that process. So that's the high level efficiency of how the team use it on a day-to-day level. Some statistics around that, we're seeing around about 50% improvement on call rate to an opportunity. We've seen around about a 20% increase in opportunity value, although our sales cycles are 9 to 18 months. So they mature over a larger time, I guess. And some of our deals go well into excess of 7 figures. So sometimes being able to see the opportunity value at this stage of the project, given that we've only been live in Salesforce for 6 months, it's difficult to quantify, but we're already seeing the growth there of around about 20% with those opportunities still to mature. So I expect that to go much higher. And again, conversion is hard to call at this point, but we are seeing around a 60% increase in the conversion once it gets to that point. So some quite hard-hitting metrics, and I think the reason why I give you that story at the beginning is because that's exactly how they're using it. And I think where I now go back to Fredrik from a sales strategy standpoint, I mean, in my role, I engage with a lot of directors of a lot of different countries and have a lot of stakeholders that I have internals that support them. And we're always trying to build plans of where is the best place to focus. So now we can go and look at, well, what accounts do we have in our CRM that are high propensity to buy? Which are the ones that don't exist in our CRM that have a high propensity to buy? Why don't we have them? Let's go and invest in the names around those that are GDPR compliant so we can fill the top of the funnel with quality data before we even get to a lead generation standpoint. And that's sort of the phase that we're in at the moment, is being able to then look at the total addressable market, where the highest propensity to buy is, then align our marketing spend to the data and the right names in the companies that are searching on the right topics that relate to the key product, and then go and market to them with those keywords and messaging to then improve the lead funnel at the top. So again, there's no wonder why we're starting to see that significant increase, but we're really at the beginning of that journey.
Yeah, absolutely, a very powerful message there, though, and the level of effort to get to that point has been a significant amount of investment in time and money. I'd like to open it up to the audience now. Does anybody get any questions for the panel or myself or anybody?
Hi, I've got a question to both of you. What tools do you use to identify? So obviously, I understand internally you can see how they opening emails and how they're downloading assets, but how can you see what competitors they're researching and what are they doing to research topics in general?
So we're looking at these items essentially in 3 different but very related areas. The first one is around fit. So we've taken everything that we have in Salesforce, so all existing customers and prospects, and then we've gone back 5 years to look at everything that we won and everything that we lost to build out models around the propensity. So that's the first step. The second one is intent. And that's where we're looking at tools like Bombora and Visitor Insights and these sorts of things. So we can see, because Bombora is then looking at across 40,000 different domains and publishers and so on. And we're subscribing to a number of keywords in that sense. And that then gets refreshed on a weekly basis so we can see who's now picking up, who's now investing more time and energy, so to speak, in looking at specific topics that we're interested in. Are they now tracking us? Are they tracking our competitors? And all of that information is then fed every Sunday night into Salesforce, so we're kind of tracking that trend.
So they're integrated.
Yes, it's all backed in together.
I think sorry, I was going to say, I think it's important to note as well that, you know, we're capturing the IP level information, so we're not really getting down to a contact level. We've got to go and invest in those names and put account-based marketing or demand generation in the right areas where but we're capturing the IP level information from Bombora, where they have a partnership, as Fredrik says, with 40,000 websites. And that's how we get that information. It is important to know that the medium-sized company is more successful in that aspect. When you get up into a large enterprise, and I mean 20,000 plus employee size organizations, capturing IP level across a geographic dispersed arena becomes quite troublesome. Where we see the biggest return here, and I've seen a really big increase, is in around the 500 to 5,000 and then the 5,000 to 10,000 employee bands. It's much easier for an inside salesperson to go and target an organisation of, let's say, 2,000 staff that has a handful of geographic locations based on their IP searches, and that's where we see the biggest return. Where we get into the enterprise space is, I think, where the account-based marketing piece comes in around the keywords that they're searching and then aligning the messages towards them to pull them towards us rather than us pushing out for outbound calling.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions?
Could you share with the audience the biggest challenge around the organisational design and making sure that you bring folks with you and the importance of bringing folks with you along the journey?
Yeah, sure. So I think maybe I'll take it from a marketing perspective, maybe include sales a little bit in a moment. I think one of the biggest challenges we have is that, and it's something Nick touched on actually, is that with an influx and growth of marketing technology over the past 5-10 years, there's a lot of concern, particularly in an enterprise level when we were bringing this in, around the change and the disruption it causes. So our business in particular, so Fujitsu are a Japanese business. Culturally, that comes with the challenge of a lot of our organisation are in the business for a long time. We've got employees and colleagues within our marketing department who have been in Fujitsu for 30 or 40 years. Bringing in a new technology, whether it's marketing automation, whether it's other technology that sits into the spine, it comes with a level of change. For a lot of people, that means that either the task or the roles that they perform are now effectively redundant. So there's an opportunity for a change there, an opportunity to bring them along that journey, as Phil's just mentioned. I think one of the challenges for us is that certainly in our EMEA business, we're operating across 30 different countries. So the mix of different cultures, different business processes, different legacy kind of attitudes towards technology, towards marketing focus is so varied that I think one of the biggest challenges we have is just making sure that we get everyone on the same page, getting everyone to understand the strategy of what the central marketing operations function essentially is driving now, and getting everyone bought into a common vision. So we spent quite a lot of time running through an education process. So we really kind of structured out our strategy into kind of 4 or 5 really key business points around having something in common that people could kind of buy into or kind of come on a journey with us around. And we really targeted it from our very kind of top VP level down, sponsoring and advocating a certain strategy, right through to going around the different countries or talking to different teams in countries around understanding how what we're doing will positively benefit them and the areas where they could be involved. It's still ongoing challenges. I don't think the journey is ever over. I think marketing particularly is constantly evolving, has a constant need to evolve to stay relevant, particularly at an enterprise level. But it's something we're consciously aware of as one of the biggest things that can be either a success or a failure for what you're trying to do in marketing.
Thanks, Dan. This gentleman here is...
Yeah, so thanks. I've got a very specific and a more general question. Bombora, how do you spell that?
B-O-M-B-O-R-A.
Thank you. More general question. One of my challenges is we send over our SQLs and sales like those. That's agreed with them, but there's still a realization in the organization it's very important that marketing supports throughout the sales process, really up to the PO and even beyond. How do you work out where there are sticking points in that sales process, and can you use marketing automation to help you with that?
So we are seeing very much the same challenges. I mean, where do you get stuck on an opportunity and what can marketing do to kind of help unstick that? It's not a trivial question. and it's an even less trivial task to try to go and address. We've spent an absolutely insane amount of time trying to get people to understand the funnel from an e-staff level and all the way down, because they see it extremely simplified. Well, you get a name in, it's a lead, we close it, everybody's happy. Yeah, but this is a B2B business, 12 to 18 month sales cycle. You're not going to touch a major organization for a 7-figure deal once. So the whole point is, how many touch points do we have? How much are we investing in each touch point? What kinds of touch points do we have? And how do we then optimize that journey? And then I had the question from our CEO quite recently. He was saying, well, how many touch points should we have? And my response to him was, as many as possible, at the right price. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Well, if we're looking at our annual customer user event, which is essentially a training and enable event for customers, that's costing us about $2,000 per individual that shows up. You don't want to have 100 people show up at that event from one company, because it's going to be too expensive for you. But at the same time, if you only have kind of social media or people responding to email, you might be able to do 20 of those, and it's going to cost you $1 a pop. That might be super efficient, but you're not, to your point, helping to move things along at the right time. And when I came in, and to some extent, still today, marketing is still being seen as wedding planners. Take this event as an example. It's like bumps in seats, fantastic, everybody's happy. We fed people and people fill out forms and the world is good. Well, the question is, okay, so do you do an event at the very beginning of someone's buying journey? Do you do an event at the beginning of our sales journey? Do you do it halfway down the funnel or towards the end? Well, it depends on the kind of activity. So it's finding out what things have an impact at what stage of the journey. And again, I came into literally an argument with our chief sales officer. We were looking at the plans. Our fiscal year started now in July. And he was looking at the marketing plan. It's like, this doesn't make any sense. What do you mean? You're just doing more of the same and expecting a different result. Well, last time I checked, marketing haven't figured out a new silver bullet. The marketing mix is still the marketing mix, but what we have to do is to then figure out how do we kind of change and optimize where we are, and where we have a challenge from our perspective, it's really at the top of the funnel. We're very good at looking at existing customers and kind of upselling and cross-selling and feeding these guys. We're not adding enough net new. We're not getting any more money, so we then need to change the marketing mix. How do we now drive more stuff at the top of the funnel to make sure that we keep James and his team busy to then feed into the account managers and so on? So it's rejigging that. And when he kind of started to understand that, it's like, oh, right. So you're doing the same thing, you're just doing it in a different mix. Like, yes. But what I'm tracking from a marketing perspective, which is really important, is not just how we track along that customer's buying journey, because the sales guys, they only think about the sales journey, which is, 20% of the buying journey. But what I want to track as well is how many sales engagements do we have? How many emails are being sent from the sales guy? How many responses do they get back from the customer? How many meetings are they setting up? What sort of content are they sending through? How much time is an SE spending on site to do a proof of concept? So I mean, if an sales guy is spending like 2 meetings and a half a dozen emails and they close the deal, great, that was a $100,000 deal. Yeah, but the SE spent 2 weeks on site for a POC. Bad return on investment on that time.
I think also it's about scalability, right? So if you're talking about targeting 10,000 organisations and managing that velocity from the point that you've got an opportunity through to close, it's much easier to do on a smaller scale, of course, right? So picking a select number of accounts where you know you're successful as a business, and then building out those hierarchical maps of who the movers and shakers are within that business, and then aligning the messaging towards them, not just in terms of what they're doing in surge and intent, but more importantly, there are a lot of organisations out there that will help you with what these people are searching on in terms of LinkedIn. You know, what are they talking about? What groups are they in? And I think it's about getting in front of them at that point. But really that's down to how many resources have you got to deliver it, what's the cost of that sale, and how many accounts are you talking about? Because if you go and try and do that at 10,000 accounts, you're never doing it. You pick 100, you know, in my experience, I've done it before in automotive brands. We picked the top 20 automotive brands, there's not many. They're broken down by country. We looked at the hierarchies, then we really went out with the true account-based marketing approach to actually get in front of them. And that's where we saw a significant increase in velocity. So for me, it's about scalability and about the resources and budget you've got to deliver it to actually answer that question directly.
I just add one quick point on that. I completely agree with parts from both of yours. I think it completely depends on what the business is focused on as well, from supporting the sales strategy and objectives. So that kind of tweaking the marketing mix is one of the key things, and we particularly have a bad history of kind of rinse and repeat. You do the same things with very little insight and understanding, and yet you repeat it every single year until it's challenged by whoever's cutting your budget. And I think one of the biggest things for us is that the business strategy, for Fujitsu at least, has shifted in the last few years to our sales organisation and sales leaders saying, we literally do not want any more leads. We don't have the resources and time, or it's not worth our investment to pursue them. Marketing, please don't give us any more leads. What we do want is you to shift the marketing mix and go very heavily ABM focused. Sure. You know, we'll look at 20, 30 accounts in the region and drive 80% of our revenue and closes from those. Yeah. So I think it's being really in tune, and that comes from that sales and marketing alignment partnership, which I'd love to learn more from you guys about. Around having that focus around where's marketing's dollars most effectively spent for that.
I mean, we've had that challenge. I mean, coming in now to this fiscal year, we've been beaten up badly from a marketing perspective for exactly the same reasons, because when we did the acquisition, everything was focused on protecting that customer base, penetrate that customer base. No money literally was spent on net new customer acquisition. And now we're in fiscal 20, like, where are the net new leads? Well, we haven't been spending any money on that. Well, we need to. Yeah, but marketing, we operate in kind of 6 to 18 months out. So it's going to take some time for us to kind of crank that back up again. So it's...
Yeah, completely agree.
It's the shift in strategy doesn't happen overnight. Absolutely. Well, the change might happen, but the results take some time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we've time for just one more question before we move on. Has anybody got another question?
Hi everyone. Nick, you spoke earlier about marketers growing their data again now. Can the panel talk about where they are in terms of their marketing data from post-GDPR?
Yes, I think for us, we're kind of still feeling the back-end effects of going through our kind of comparatively giant consolidation and standardization piece of work. We're now reaching a point, I think, where the business has started to settle on its decisions and its different rules around how our business interprets GDPR, how we address it, and how we look at our database from a usable or marketable perspective. We're now starting to have more conversations around how do we enrich that data, whether that's through data acquisitions, whether it's through looking at intent data providers. But again, I would say from a perspective of data acquisition, certainly working with reputable data providers who are GDPR compliant and not GDPR compliant is a big focus for us from a risk perspective. But equally the right data. So you can't just, same as the rest of your marketing, you can't just look at investing in something and say, right, I'm going to throw 10 grand or 100 grand at a load of data and just throw that into our campaigns, throw that into our funnel. For us, we're trying to take the approach where we're looking at, again, in line with our sales strategy, and that's a key part, looking at our key accounts and looking at where either the gaps are in terms of audiences we're trying to identify, whether that's account penetration or reach, or whether that's looking into accounts that we want to do more business with and we're not yet speaking to them. We don't have enough of a wide team that we're talking to in there. So I think acquisition is an area that I think is starting to come back, as Nick mentioned in his talk earlier. But it's got to be acquisition for the right reason. It can't just be, we've got a bit more budget, let's try and throw that into there. So that's the approach we're taking.
I mean, I would voice exactly what you've just said. I think we're in a very similar point of that journey. I think the only other bit that I would add to that is obviously country by country it's different. Germany is double opt-in, so I think it's the most difficult place to get that quality data and get a result out the back of it. Some of the southern European countries are a bit more relaxed, it seems, around legitimate interest versus consent, and it seems like no one's really complaining there, so I think people are slowly loosening the buckle there of what they can do, and the UK's somewhere in the middle, and I think that's probably the right balance. But I'd echo everything you've just said, but in line with what we're doing in making sure that you're buying it in the right accounts, right, and picking the right supplier. Most companies now act as a publisher, not as a seller, so I think the days of actually buying data are gone, right? You can lease data. They act as a publisher. They list you as a partner on their website. They're televerifying that data, and that's how they're making it compliant as you as a partner, not as a vendor or a customer of theirs. But yeah, I'd say we're exactly the same point of our journey there, and just making sure that we buy the right data and the right net new accounts, but also understanding who we want to do business with, and then making sure that we're enriching that data with the right information to go and target them effectively.
Great.
Anything to add?
Well, I think it's always something to add. But I think GDPR, it was such a big upheaval in the markets. And if you're looking at the spectrum of how organizations decided to interpret that, I mean, some went as far as we're going to get rid of everything and essentially start from scratch. Might have been a good reason if you had a poor database to begin with. Others basically said, well, nothing's really changed. We're engaging with these people already. And I think as we've been progressing through that journey as well, we had a very, very strict view in the beginning. But then if you actually start reading through, and to your point around kind of the southern European countries, doesn't really seem to be much of an obstacle. Germany by default is trickier. But legitimate interest is relevant, and particularly given that it's a B2B context, it makes things a little bit easier, so to speak.
I think also it depends what you're using the data for.
Yeah.
Right, if you want to do outbound marketing, then you've got to be pretty confident that it's GDPR compliance to mass emailings. I think from a legitimate interest standpoint, from a sales perspective, I feel perfectly comfortable with that.
Yeah. Good. Great, thanks very much indeed, guys. I'd like to thank Fredrik, James and Tim for their contribution this afternoon. That's been really, really insightful. I really appreciate that. And I'll hand it back to Phil.